Hello, good morning, and welcome to this very special Cardiff Live Business Surgery. With web design and digital marketing agency WebBox, we'll be hearing from Managing Director Will Roberts. My name is Greg Ingham, and thank you for joining us for what is going to be a fascinating business surgery. In today's session, we'll discuss top tips for clients and how to work optimally with web partners, some key projects in detail, and we'll get under the skin of web development from a client's point of view. It'll include anatomy of web development. WebBox will be talking through 2 case studies, taking and interpreting a brief, strategy, wireframes, designs, process, outcome, and learnings. Please do send your questions and thoughts using the Q&A button below. Do add your company name to your question or be anonymous if you'd prefer. And I'm sure we'll have some good questions today. It's such a key area, such a dynamic area where change is everywhere and all companies have to sharpen their digital pencils. If that's a thing, it really isn't, is it? Note that today's business surgery is being recorded and will be on both our Cardiff Live YouTube channels this afternoon. First, some updates from us. Cardiff Live Awards, they're taking place in 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks this Thursday on September 30th at City Hall. We just can't wait. It's been some little while since we've been able to get everyone together, and it'll be a fantastic evening. Everyone coming together from charities and arts, education, to all sectors of business, including tech companies, innovators, civic companies, and so on. After this year of all years, it'll be just the best Cardiff occasion in ages. We're technically sold out, and thank you for that. But the odd 1 or 2 places may come free, so please check social and the Cardiff Live Awards website for any late availability. These, of course, are the postponed from the spring of this year awards. For next year, we'll be back again in the spring on March 31st. If you're an ambitious company or one seeking more business or plain proud to be a leading Cardiff company, please do consider sponsoring the Cardiff Live Awards in 2022. Effective, efficient, and uber glam, of course. Cardiff Property Awards are on the 26th of November, so not so long just yet, at the Coal Exchange. It's just a huge gathering of property and pro services companies. Nominations for those close on October 11th. It's free to enter on the website, the Property Awards website. Partner tables and tickets are available too. Our latest sponsor, by the way, is Savills, and welcome to them. Please talk with the Cardiff Live team about the remaining sponsorships. These business surgeries, these webinars are bespoke deep dive sessions showcasing companies' expertise, as we'll be discussing today with WebBox, through discussion. Please do talk to us about how you might be involved. They'll be continuing, of course, as virtual in the future, and they'll have that enduring value via our Cardiff Live YouTube channel. If business begins with a conversation, perhaps we should talk. Of course, at the heart of all of this, all that we do in Cardiff is our magazine, Cardiff Live. We're really, really proud to publish a magazine that celebrates the very best of this incredible city. We're here to celebrate the good stuff in Cardiff, in print, on screen, and in person. Thank you for your support. Right, okay, let's do it. So let's bring forward our speaker for today, Managing Director of WebBox. It's Will Roberts. Will, there you are. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you, Greg?
Yeah, good. Are you in the office at the moment?
I am. It's one of my lucky days that I'm in the office. So yeah, I'm in the office a few days a week and then work from home a few days as well.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to that and multiple other areas, of course, but perhaps set the scene for the history and size of WebBox. Where have you come from? What scale are you?
Absolutely. So established all the way back in 2008. I know I don't look old enough, but there's plenty of grey hair. And, you know, we're now a team of 12, most based here in Cardiff, but we've also adopted, obviously, some hybrid and fully remote team members. And yeah, I guess with kind of, what's that, 13 years experience, we've seen a lot of change, which is exciting, and obviously a challenge at the same time to make sure that we're always at the forefront for our clients.
Just to take that, I mean, yours is probably the most dynamic sector of all, that technology challenges us all, the world of infinite opportunity and change. How do you stay abreast? How do you keep up to date, keep fresh?
You know, I think it's one of the probably fastest moving sectors in reality, and I think that puts pressure on us to make sure that we're actually ahead of the curve. So really what that means is on the ground for our team is making sure that they are constantly reading, researching and training. So for example, for our paid ads team, they're constantly training with Google and Facebook and making sure that they're abreast of the latest changes and trends. For developers, it's more a case of having a look at what's new out there, new frameworks, new technologies, and again, making sure that they are implemented within our projects. But we've realized very early on that actually training is a key part of kind of what's going to make our business a success. Therefore, we actually set time aside for our team to undertake self-learning and training. So one of the things that kind of we do on a regular basis is ask the team to kind of look at what they would like to read into, any kind of new technologies or kind of new trends coming out, and they can just request time away from projects day to day to actually spend time into reading into those and learning and developing and training.
Yeah, it must be really interesting trying to get the balance between legacy expertise and deep knowledge, but actually being, outrun by new tech or new thinking. But yours is a very transparent world. Everyone can see the outcome of your work and indeed your competitors and wherever and so on. So that must be a constant source of inspiration, just looking all the time to see what others are doing.
Yeah, it is. And actually, I think that's one of the things why, one of the reasons why it's actually just exciting to work in the industry. You're constantly, finding new things, looking at different trends, and actually then we can look at how we can apply those into client scenarios. So we love it. It's just genuinely exciting to do that.
Well, one of the many wonderful things about technologists is you are inherently optimistic. There's always something better, cooler, newer, smarter, whatever out there. Talk us through what WebBox actually does, the types of work. We know that you're strong on e-commerce, but it's a broader offering than that.
Yeah, so we straddle two core areas. So the first being bespoke UX design and development. So what that means in practice is kind of cutting edge websites or web platforms that we design and create from the ground up. The other side of the agency is all around kind of paid ads. So that could be anything from like a Google Ads campaign through to running ads on Facebook or Instagram, for example. Now we've seen a huge growth there because the reality is that's where things are moving from a marketing strategy point of view. And as we all know, when businesses put information out on social media, it doesn't get much reach. And that's obviously because platforms like Facebook want your money. It's as simple as that. So we're seeing big growth there. But yeah, we cover those two areas in a nutshell.
What do you say to those who are cautious about social media in this respect, that it's an uncontrolled environment? Your ads, your marketing, your messaging can appear alongside, frankly, some very toxic messaging.
Yeah, we have had some instances where, those kind of instances arise, and it can be difficult to manage that. But I think it comes down to very focused targeting and being very intentional with how you run a paid ads campaign. So of course you can take that scattergun approach whereby you simply put your ads out there with very little to find that actually your ads, kind of get mixed up with content that you would rather it not get mixed up with. But I think if you've got a strategy behind it and a bit more of a purpose and a very targeted campaign, often those scenarios can be avoided. I think the other benefit of this, Greg, is actually that we can make sure that we're putting ads in front of your exact target audience, and we can be very, very specific with that. So gone are the days really where you might just say, we want to be in front of a particular age group and, define whether it's male or female that sees it and broad things like that. And actually we can start to get very granular with data to actually make sure that your ads are really in front of people who are probably incredibly interested in your product or service. Now that's great for businesses, but obviously it kind of probably opens a can of worms for consumers because you suddenly realize how much data these platforms have got on you.
Yeah, and there is a bigger picture there, which perhaps we won't get into, about data privacy and restraints, which are likely to come in some form to some of those major platforms. We'll come on to some examples of your work. You'll be talking through two great case studies shortly. Talk us about the size of client. Someone watching this at the moment, what's the sort of, frankly, the smallest type of client or scale of work, perhaps through to the largest?
I guess the smallest of our clients would be considered a startup, whereby technically they have no revenue, they're just starting out, and maybe they've just had an idea that they kind of want to bring to life. That startup's likely had investment to get them, from 0 to 10 quickly. And that's kind of an exciting project for us because we would get involved in really a lot more things than just simply developing an application. On the flip side, we work with some very large organizations, including 2 FTSE 100s. And really that gives us a different dynamic and a different involvement in those projects because in some instances, they might have an internal team that also has similar skill sets to our team. And that's really kind of, that's a breath of fresh air because often, the teams can come together, collaborate and kind of pass ideas back and forth. And really at that point, it's really about that partnership rather than looking at us as an external supplier or agency. So yeah, it's really broad, I'll be honest, Greg. But I think really what we look for is a client who has a project that we can bring our experience and expertise to, and a project also that's exciting that we want to work on.
You're a little bit coy there on your 2 FTSE 100 companies. Can you name them? Are you free to name them?
I can, yeah. So the first is Airbus, and the second is DS Smith, which is the packaging giant. So both of those we've been long-term partners of, and we've developed kind of very bespoke web platforms that help their kind of internal business processes. So they're kind of internal systems, but web-based so they can be accessed anywhere. And genuinely kind of really good projects that not only can we kind of help define requirements right from day one all the way through to delivery, but actually then when it comes to ongoing support, looking at actually kind of what would be useful to have continuous development in those projects. So yeah, I've been involved in the whole life cycle of those.
And it's diversity by size, but also diversity by sector. You've got, and we'll come on to some great strength in the third sector, but essentially you're sector agnostic as a company.
Yeah, that's right. So we've made a decision to purposely be sector agnostic. We have probably 4 or 5 sectors where we have, more clients than others. But generally speaking, we've worked across a wide number of sectors. I think there's benefit in that because sometimes, maybe a company might be thinking that they need to partner with someone who specializes within, sector A. But we found actually that sometimes if you go to that partner, they might have a very focused view of how things are done because they've, worked in that sector for so long that they start to get into a bit of a rhythm. And what I think we can bring to the table, especially for sectors that maybe we haven't got so much experience in, is actually a fresh pair of eyes. So I think we've got a really good skill set in understanding of businesses' problems and pain points, and we can really get under the skin of that and help deliver a digital project or campaign that satisfies that. And sometimes having a less specialist background, shall we say, is certainly advantageous to the client because they get to see things from a different perspective, and we get to bring added value to the project by having basically fresh eyes.
Yeah, it's an essential challenge for pretty much every business. Are they predominantly specialists or more general, more broader? Is it narrow or is it broad? And I guess in a sense you're seeking to straddle both strategies of having an expertise by technology which can apply to multiple sectors. Again, as we'll see in a moment when we come on to some projects. Companies often think, and you'll have heard this, I'm sure, countless times. They often think that web work will take longer, it costs more, it needs more of our time. What's your view? How do you allay such concerns?
Oh, good question, Greg. This is a key question that we always get asked at the start of a project, when it comes to timescales. I think, first things first, we need to make sure that expectations are aligned. I'm a really big believer in making sure that, here at WebBox, we're not kind of over-promising and under-delivering. So there's no point us all working towards a deadline, which is just simply not achievable. But I do think there's a huge benefit in a world of web from a timescale point of view. Because if you compare that against, for example, mobile app development, especially when it comes to native apps, they're far longer traditionally to develop. And especially then once they're actually live within an app store, they can be timely to continuously develop and re-release. So I think there's a huge advantage in using web technologies to, in some instances, fast track the delivery of a project and also allow you to update it far easier moving forward.
What advice would you give clients on how to handle web agencies per se, and maybe you specifically?
Yeah, I think I definitely say as the first thing, top of your list needs to be that you need to look at an external agency as a partner. Don't look at them as an external supplier or someone who just outsource work to. I think at that point, it's probably not going to be a good relationship. But if you see the value that they're bringing and you see them as a partner, then the relationship will be very different. So I often kind of use the analogy that if you kind of treat an agency as if you're onboarding an employee, then it'll probably start very well. So you wouldn't onboard an employee just by kind of, giving them a brief, having a 10-minute phone call and saying, right, get on with it. You'd go through an induction process, you would onboard them, you would make sure they know your company values and really kind of what you're about and what the aims and objectives of the business are. I think they're really important principles for you to adopt when onboarding a new agency, because they really should be a long-term partner of yours. So I think really businesses need to invest in that onboarding process, and that's really important. And the other thing I would say is also finding an agency that aligns with your business's values and objectives. So if you're looking, for example, for fast growth, then you need to align with an agency that probably has got some experience in taking brands from here to here very quickly and can actually evidence that. Or if you're looking for an agency that has a particular expertise or is particularly transparent because you've had some bad experiences in the past, then I think you need to align yourself with agencies that put that at the forefront of their proposition.
You've touched on this already, but just a bit more flesh in this area. Clients clearly come from all different levels of web knowledge. Some, perhaps not that proficient. Talk us through the discovery process and what you have found the best way to be operating. Once you've perhaps got over the hump of the broad outline of a deal, of an agreement being placed, what is it then like, those first few meetings and process?
I think it's really important that both parties have an appreciation of what they're bringing to the table. So to put that into practice, we get involved in projects to bring our expertise to that project, and therefore we can't expect our clients to also have their expertise. So I guess first and foremost, being able to speak in plain English is obviously a huge benefit, because obviously a lot of people within the world of web sometimes struggle with that. I think the other thing is actually for us to work with clients to help them define exactly what they're looking for. So if a client came to us and said, broadly speaking, we're looking to grow or we're looking to generate more inquiries or something, then actually to be able to deep dive into that and ask very specific questions, I think is a kind of helpful part of that process. Now, when it comes to the world of web and you're looking at quite a technical web project, that's a whole different kettle of fish, of course. And what we've kind of developed is a process in which we work with clients to take them through a series of workshops where we tease out their exact requirements. So if I put this into a real life project for you, Greg, if maybe a third sector client is looking to generate more donations through their website, then actually we need to deep dive into that to ask all of those nitty-gritty questions, such as, Are you looking to increase regular giving or one-off giving? How would you accept those payments? What payment gateway would you use? Would you want the donations to be rounded up to the nearest pound, which is a trend? Would you want to offer a freebie to those who donate to the charity? And it's really our role to deep dive into the nitty-gritty, to then write alongside our clients what we call a scope of work, so that we have a written document of what is part of this project. And I think that's a really important piece, if I could just dwell on that, because so many digital projects go ahead without putting the legwork up front. And that's a problem, because midway through the project, you'll find yourself realizing that there's what we call scope creep, where maybe expectations are misaligned, and the agency think they're doing some A, B, and C, and the business wants actually D, E, and F. And I think it's really important to put that time in up front to write this scope of work, and to make sure that it is inclusive of everything that you're looking for. And then that starts the working relationship and the partnership off on the right foot.
We'll come on very shortly to your work with St John's Ambulance, which you'll be sharing that project with us. We've had a flurry of questions, each from our good friend anonymous attendee, which is always welcome. Do you do SEO, and is it important?
Good question. So we have taken some time to actually step back throughout the pandemic. And one of the things that we actually did is be far more specific in the services that we offer. SEO was actually one of the services that we decided to drop last year. So it's not a service that we offer anymore, but we offer it in that as part of a web project. We would ensure that the website has been built with SEO in mind. So everything from, the basics of meta tags all the way through to page speed, all of that is kind of included, but we don't offer it anymore as an ongoing service.
You're in that broader area, your primary focus is on paid search rather than SEO work.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Related to that, I suspect, also ask, do you provide stats to clients, and do most clients value quantity over quality for digital solutions, or is this changing with specific targeting?
So we absolutely do offer stats. So I might need a bit more context for this question, but I'll take it to where I think it's going. So in reality, if you're starting out with a campaign, it's really important for us to look at trend data and to look at industry averages to inform a client as to what they can expect from a campaign like this. Once the campaign is up and running, though, we very much get into the data at that point, and we share statistics on a regular basis with our clients on how those campaigns are performing. Obviously, depending on the sector and depending on the KPIs and objectives, will very much vary how we report back to the client.
So, I mean, do you do effectively qualitative reporting so that you can trace, if leads have been generated? It's one thing to have click-throughs or alternatively any form of lead, but quite another to have a high quality, high value lead. How does that process work?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of our clients are very, should we say, upfront about the fact that it's about quality over quantity, and others vice versa. They want the quantity because they can then whittle it down. So again, that's taken into consideration when we start a campaign. But that being said, our general approach is very much about quality over quantity. So it is obviously of utmost importance to make sure that the leads that come through, your inquiries, are those that you can actually kind of get hold of. They've got an interest in your service and they're almost expecting your call. There's no point in us getting a flurry of leads through and they're obviously no value. So yeah, unless the client says otherwise, it's very much a quality over quantity process.
A specific question, which obviously I'm sure would require far more context and a follow-up, but it's from Donna Ali, who has asked, what would be the key features in developing a business directory?
Good question, Donna. So I think when it comes to a business directory, I would probably kind of come back to what's its purpose initially, because I think business directories can go very much in different directions. If your purpose of a business directory is to monetize that through subscriptions, then I would probably kind of take that question in a different way. Otherwise, you can go down the route of obviously free listings and make money from advertising on a site. But I think the important thing is to understand that first. Once we understand the business model, at that point, then we can start looking at the features and what the website would need to have in order to be successful. But I think the fundamentals of how that gets monetized will likely dictate the features of that kind of project.
It's almost start at the end point. What do you seek to achieve, and then build the steps and the functionality to obtain that.
That's it.
Let's come to this St John's ambulance piece. Talk us through. You've got a couple of slides to show through, and it's really about process and then outcome. So you.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's just pull this up. So hopefully you can see my screen.
Yeah, that's good.
So obviously we're all aware of St John. I'm sure it's an organisation which needs no introduction. Interestingly for this, if I just kind of give a bit of context, so they approached us just prior to the pandemic with a plan to try and uniform their web presence and their digital activity. So I think they've got themselves into a situation where each department within the organisation would find it easier to spin up a microsite than actually kind of work within the existing main corporate website.
And Will, sorry, just one step back. How did they get hold of you? How did you appear on their radar?
So we've done work for them in the past, many years ago for their centenary, their 100th year anniversary. But obviously, as you can imagine, you know, from years back, there's been a lot of change in staff. So they've re-engaged with us, and we went through a formal tender process to actually pitch for this project.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Talk us through the project. How you approached it, and what the outcomes were.
Absolutely. So I think the first things first is we had to get a really good understanding as to kind of what the aims of the project were. So we actually worked with their internal marketing team to define that. And we did that through a series of different ways. So everything from a brief being supplied to us, all the way through to getting the key stakeholders and heads of departments to a workshop where we basically gave them the mic and allowed them to voice their pain points, their struggles, and what they would like to see from the new website. And then all of that was collated and put into a scope of work. Obviously, at that point then, the pandemic came. So that was good timing. So at that point, you know, from St John's point of view, because of the work they get involved in and their partnership with NHS Wales, they were obviously very heavily involved in kind of NHS frontline services. So we were able to accommodate that by splitting the project up into phases. So the project was of a fair size, so we decided to split it into 3 phases, whereby we would deliver phase 1 as soon as possible within the pandemic. Now, what phase 1 was ultimately focusing on 2 key areas, especially with the pandemic in mind. The first was getting volunteers to volunteer within the organisation, and second was the donations to kind of raise awareness of the work they do.
So were there very specific outcomes which were intended from that first phase?
Absolutely right, yeah. So we kind of had a much broader scope initially, and we had to really kind of knuckle down as to what the priorities were. And we ended up launching phase 1 within obviously the height of lockdown, and focusing on just those 2 key areas, because that in itself was a far better web presence than obviously what was in place beforehand, and really focused in on the 2 key areas which they wanted to bring to the forefront at that time. So after that, we are now in the kind of process of scoping out phase 2 and 3, because actually what's interesting is throughout the pandemic, their organization's requirements have changed. So we're actually kind of looking to rework phase 2 and 3 and rework its priorities. And actually that's a really exciting process, because again, even though some months have passed, it's good to go back to re-engage with those key stakeholders and really find out what's changed in their kind of department and what impact that will have on the website. So that's been kind of a project we've done with St. John. Now, I've just got some pictures which ultimately put all of this into context, because I just want to kind of talk through the process, which is quite organic and bespoke. Now, this isn't our full process because we could be here for a long time, but this is just a snapshot of what we do. So you can see from some of the pictures here, we start with a research phase, and that's really our kind of opportunity to step back. So it's to step back to say, who does St. John technically compete against? So that's not only from a first aid point of view, but also from a charitable point of view. And who else is in the market? Who else is appearing when people might be doing these kind of Google searches to find organizations like St. John? And then we also do internal research. So we have a look at what websites they have in their kind of armory. And as you can see on the right-hand side, they had quite a few microsites, all kind of looking fairly similar with some differences. And this was one of their biggest pain points, because as they've grown to have a number of different microsites, it's becoming more and more difficult to update and maintain. So that's a snapshot of that first phase. We then kind of, through various workshops and consultation, go forward a few steps and we move into the wireframing stage. And this is where we start to put together layouts at a very elementary level. And we start to say, what could the website look like? This is our opportunity to think big. But we do it in a rudimentary way initially, so that actually we can move things around the page very quickly and easily, to kind of just see where things should appear and to start putting user flows together. So some people might have seen these kind of things before, but I guess wireframes could be new to others here as well. So that's the next stage. And then really kind of, if I just show a final, if we, again, fast forward a few steps, the final product ends up with something which is mobile first. So this is the website on a tablet, and how it scales down and focuses again on those two key areas of getting involved and donating to St. John. And how that looks again on a mobile device takes our first priority, because for St. John in particular, they get more mobile traffic than desktop traffic. And then again, just how that scales up on a full desktop to have the full navigation and full call to actions taking up the entire width of the screen. Now that's a real quick snapshot, Greg, of just the project, and you can imagine how many phases go in between those.
Well, let's have some sense of timescale there from the first scoping, which had to be narrowed in purpose pretty rapidly, to this iteration. What type of time horizon was that?
I think off the top of my head, I think we were probably around 4 or 5 months start to completion of phase 1. And I would estimate phases 2 and 3 to probably be the same combined.
I mean, everyone in business thinks their business is time critical, but this was real time work, and in many ways, as well as commercially valuable, of course, to you. This must have been a very satisfying piece of work to work on. I've
got to say, on a personal note, it really was to work on a project that we knew had a big impact within the pandemic. I think was actually very satisfying and very satisfying for the team as well. To know that actually St. John were at the front line supporting NHS Wales within Wales, I think was just a moment of pride, should we say, for our team, definitely.
Good. If you could just switch out of the screen share, we'll come on to some other points and then come back to the second example. Thanks. So we're talking the pandemic. Just prior to the pandemic, you moved into new premises. I think you used the phrase, the paint was still drying when the pandemic struck. So take that area. What's your thinking on working from home? You mentioned you're doing this hybrid approach yourself, remote working, team bonding, collaborative working. How's that going to play out for you?
Yeah, so to put some context to the listeners, we actually always wanted to invest in our own office, to have a space of our own to put our own stamp on. And we finally found our kind of perfect office building 18 months after looking for it. We purchased it, went through a fit out process, and the paint was still drying. And just weeks after that, the pandemic came. So we had this bright, shiny new office that obviously was then gathering dust as we all moved to remote working. So that's the context. And it was a real shame because obviously from a timing point of view, it was far from ideal. But I think actually looking back on it now, hindsight's a great thing. We are looking long-term for our business, and therefore we still want a Cardiff base. So our plans have not changed at all. But what I think it's opened our eyes to is the benefits of hybrid working. And for some skill sets that we recruit for, fully remote working as well. So first and foremost, we've adopted hybrid working here. So the team generally work in the office 3 days a week, and they work from home 2 days a week. And that changes for some individuals depending on distance to the office and other things like childcare. So we want to be flexible, but for the majority, it's that split.
And so how much from your managerial point of view is you prompting it because the value in people being together, and how much is, let it run, it's up to the team to decide?
I took an approach which some might or might not agree with, but I actually posed a question to the team, and I wanted it to really be led by them. I was always really clear that I think there's significant benefit in our team being in one place at one time for a number of different reasons, but mainly for that kind of culture and collaboration piece. I think that's really important. But we had threw the question out there and we had a debate, and actually the feedback that I received was that actually people wanted that mix. They kind of liked the banter around the water machine, if I can use the expression, but they also liked the focus and flexibility of working from home. So
particularly for developers, presumably, who absolutely need to be in the zone. Yeah.
Absolutely right. So for them, it's very much a case of headphones on, head down, and they really get into the zone. And if you disturb them, that's going to be your problem. So I think that's really beneficial for them in particular. So we've put this hybrid model in place, and we've had that now for quite a few months. And again, the feedback remains really positive around that. I regularly ask the team how it's working out for them, and it's one which they're really happy with. But we also do have some of our team which are fully remote, which again is bringing a new dynamic to the team, but one which I genuinely welcome. But interestingly, Greg, if you asked me 2-3 years ago, would we do hybrid working or would we do fully remote working? I probably would have had a very quick response to that. But things have changed, and I certainly now think for the better.
When you look at the business and the ambitions you have for it in terms of further scaling up, is recruitment an issue, and is that at least potentially solved by wholly remote working, even offshoring?
I think recruitment is a major issue in our sector at the moment. There is a significant skill shortage. That's no secret. And I think actually many sectors are experiencing the same at the moment. That being said, for us, the ability to recruit further afield has significantly helped us grow the team. That being said, that doesn't negate the fact that there is still a skill shortage. And when we've flung the kind of gates wide open and allowed applicants from all over the UK, it hasn't necessarily turned into a rush of applicants. So it certainly helps, but it's not as significant as one might consider it to have been. In terms of overseas, for us, we've made the decision that that's not an option at this stage. One of the reasons behind that is actually we still would want the team to get together now and again for that social aspect. So we want to limit that to the UK initially, so that if we ever do have team days and things like that, then we can get people together fairly easily.
Yeah, that's harder if someone's in Bangalore or Eastern Europe or wherever, or even the north of England, I guess. So if it's not going to be solved, it may be helped by some degree more remote working. How are you going about trying to find the great stars of tomorrow to join you?
Yeah, do you know, one of our values at WebBox is actually being seriously skilled, and one of the ways in which that impacts us is how we recruit. So we don't generally recruit, juniors or grads, but actually only those with enough experience to add value to the projects we get involved in. And therefore, it has a huge impact, because when we come to recruitment, we're looking for people who have that experience and have that kind of something else, that, that kind of almost indescribable attribute, which can add some value to our team and to our clients. So recruitment's always tough, but I think it's sometimes tougher for us because we won't just recruit for the sake of it, just to fill a seat. I'm very particular in terms of who we bring on board and who can add value to client projects. So yeah, that's the challenge.
There's a big piece of work from Google about recruitment techniques, and their own ultimately is more focused on character than on skills, and I guess that's directionally where you are too. I want to bring in a couple of other points externally, then we'll come on to the BVI piece in a sec. From Phil Edwards, what would be your key SEO tips for a company that is now no longer doing SEO? A bit of a freebie here for Phil.
That's it. No, that's fine, Phil. So I think the first thing, and probably one of the main focuses of Google at the moment, is page speed. So for your website to load, within a blink of an eye is what Google are looking for. And one of the reasons for that is Google shifted about a year or two ago to what we call mobile first indexing, which means actually they're indexing your website depending on its mobile capability and speed before looking at it on a desktop. Now that's incredibly important, because you might be on a mobile device without Wi-Fi, you might have 4G or even 3G. And therefore, if you've got these large images which are non-compressed and very bulky websites, and they take 4 seconds to load, immediately you will find your rankings will be far lower than actually that of websites that load quickly. So page speed would be top of my agenda if I were you, Phil.
Yeah, page speed, that sounds like very smart, pragmatic advice. It's almost, think like a consumer. The number of times you go to a site, it doesn't bloody load, you go somewhere else. And you've lost someone in a trice simply because of construction, or at least the size of images. Back to anonymous attendee, who may be the same anonymous attendee, you never know, as previously. Do you use platforms such as Squarespace, or is it all bespoke?
So we do use off-the-shelf platforms, not necessarily Squarespace, but we do use things like WordPress, Zulu, Magento, and others, which are kind of household names for content management systems. But we also have experience with writing fully bespoke content management systems. I think the kind of important thing to note here, though, is this is not about what we want to use or what we think would be easiest for the project. This is very much about kind of looking at the project's requirements and suggesting the best content management system for the project.
Yeah. Okay, Donna, who asked previously about business directory. First of all, she says thanks for the answer, which is gracious. Could you share how much a site like St. John's would cost? Ballpark, I guess.
I'm not able to share that, Donna, because it might not be fair on our clients, and I haven't got authorization to do that. What I can say, though, is obviously projects that do last 4 or 5 months for a particular phase. You can only imagine the amount of time investment that our team would put into that. So there has to be an appreciation, I guess, that when you are working with an organization and really focusing on user experience and having a bespoke approach, that yes, there's a lot of time which goes into it, but the value off the back is then very much measurable. So I'm happy to go into specifics, Donna, if we can maybe pick that conversation up separately. But for now, I'll kindly decline.
That's okay. And as a slightly more general point about work and when you price it up and so on, you've used the expression, I think, brutal transparency, or very, very clear with clients, particularly about the time taken. Do you share in terms your profit margin with clients? Do they know what you're making each time, or is that too transparent?
Yeah, so we've got a value which is being brutally transparent, and it is what it is. There's no way to get around that. We are as transparent as one can be, to actually talk to clients about the commercials behind a project. And in some instances, that actually might be a case of saying a profit margin that might be had for that project, to actually sometimes educate a client in terms of for how we would look at it from our side of the fence. But I think fundamentally that value goes throughout our agency. So whether it's giving timesheets to a client to say this is actually how our team has spent their time on your project, all the way through to being really transparent with our pricing and clients knowing how much we charge per hour or per day or whatever. I think that's really important, and it's a value which I hold dearly, because actually that's how I would want business to be done, if it would be in this way around, and therefore that's how I want to do business with our clients as well.
Yeah, and clients need to know you've got skin in the game, and so that that's part of the motivation in doing a piece of work, as well as the efficacy of that work, as with St John's. One last from Donna. She just asked if this recording is available later. Donna, yes, it will be. Cardiff Life YouTube channel. Also check the Cardiff Life Twitter feed and LinkedIn, but I'm sure also WebBox, its site, will have the link subsequently as well. Let's come on, Will, if we may, to your BBI work. Talk us through that, as much as you did with St John's. This is a biotech business office in Newport, is that right?
That's right, yeah. So one of their bases in Newport, so it's obviously, kind of fairly near to our office, which is beneficial. But that being said, they are a global leader, and therefore they've got presence worldwide. Now, BBI Solutions, again, kind of contacted us near the kind of start of the pandemic. And I think one of the drivers behind that was actually this shift between business they do offline and business they do online. And they realized very quickly on that they needed to increase the amount of business they do online. And that fundamentally came down to having an e-commerce part of the website. So yeah, Greg, shall I give some context to this?
Yeah, please.
So in essence, they are a pioneer of diagnostics, testing and equipment, and they are a leader, and they are growing rapidly at the moment. So they are acquiring other businesses and seeing growth, and actually they've been part of the pandemic help as well. So there's a bit of synergy there with St John. So we've actually had a few things up front from them in terms of what they wanted. Again, so things like a brief and a list of requirements. And as part of that, they purposely set out for an agency that works in what we call an agile way of working, or using the agile methodology. And what that means is actually being able to define a scope within a budget, but actually not being bound by that. So actually being able to pivot and change throughout the project, depending on the business's priorities. And actually working the project in that way has had significant benefits to BBI Solutions, and actually has accommodated changes which arose late in the day, or new business priorities throughout the project. So actually there would have really been no other way to deliver the project other than through the agile methodology. So that's been really exciting. One which has also seen us take this mobile first approach, like we did with St John, and step back and look at everything on a mobile or tablet first before we get to the experience on desktop. Now, one other thing that was different, I guess, from the project with St John is BBI Solutions were really keen to get feedback from a number of different user groups and stakeholders. So we run a series of workshops, internal and with external, clients of theirs, to get their input on the work that we're creating at every step of the way. Now, you might say, why is that important? It's important because design, for one, is very subjective. What one person likes, another might loathe. And I think it's really important to be pragmatic throughout a design process and actually get feedback from different people, whether it's internally, whether they've been in the business for 30 years or they started last week, all the way through then to your prospects and clients, to actually get their thoughts on what you're putting together. because they will often highlight something which both parties might have missed and will be very valuable to the overall process.
And Will, on design, with all the caveats about the subjectivity of response, do you find that on the whole, your role is more to be the leader or the led?
I absolutely think the leader. I think we need to bring expertise to the table to say, actually, these are the trends. This is what we think you should do. This is what we're seeing, your competitors do. Therefore, we think you should do this. We need to bring that, kind of form of conversation to the table. But also there's a balance, because another one of our values is being collaboratively creative. And it means that we will spearhead the design process, but we're not going to be arrogant within that process to always know, or to always think that we know best. I think there has to be a two-way street. And the reason I say that is because fundamentally, those within BBI Solutions will know their sector through and through. Now, we've worked within that sector beforehand and we have sector experience, but not to their level. So actually being able to lean upon their sector experience is invaluable within the design process. And I think when both parties come together is when you can call that truly creative.
Okay, good. Let's come on to the next stage.
Absolutely. So fundamentally, with this one, I've gutted out some of the steps just so that we've got just a few of the kind of final images. So as you can imagine, again, this is a project which will be completed over, I think, approximately a 6-month period. And the end result is one which, as we've said, is a mobile-first website, an e-commerce website, which is also a multilingual and a multi-region website. What that means actually on the ground is that it's not just an English-only website, there's Chinese as well, but it's also separate to that, a multi-region website, so that the user can actually split between 4 different regions that BBI Solutions cover, and there are obviously differences in functionality between those. So that's quite a complex build, and if we come through then to how that looks like on a full laptop, again, we've got the full desktop experience at this point with a video in the hero section to engage the user straight away as soon as it loads. Now, coming back to Phil's question earlier about page speed, some people say, a lot of imagery and a lot of video on a website can slow down the page speed. So we take that into consideration. So whether that's compressing all of the imagery and videos or changing its formats to new formats like WebP, all the way through to considering whether actually all of that content needs to appear on a mobile device. And in some instances, we might remove a video from a mobile device and replace that with an image so that it's quicker to load. So there's a number of things we do behind the scenes, but all of that, of course, taken into consideration. So that's everything I've got. I just want to leave everyone as well with a stat, Greg, if I may, because I think this is why we do what we do. Okay, this is why it's important to these organizations. So the stat is by 2025, 80% of business-to-business sales and interactions between suppliers and buyers will occur in digital channels. And if that isn't a motivation to move your business to a digital first operation, I don't know what else is. I think we're moving in this direction, and of course what the pandemic has done has simply sped that process up.
Yeah, that's true. This time of the great pause has also been the great accelerator as well. And I'd like to close the remaining couple of minutes or so with you on some of those points. So what have been your learnings during this pandemic? What are you doing differently? What will endure? Not just the remote or hybrid working, but what has changed?
I think one of the things that we changed very early on is actually how we position ourselves as an agency. So this is very much a personal thing, if I'm honest, but it's actually, what do we really have expertise in? What do we want to be known for? If we're banging the drum, what are we banging the drum for? And they were the kind of challenging questions which we asked ourselves right at the start of the pandemic. And the result has actually been that we are a lot more focused. We've got a team now who really focus in on their specific skill sets, and we've got a very clear proposition. So I think we're much better at identifying projects that we can add value to. and then also projects that maybe another agency could add more value to. And if that's the case, we rely on that brutally transparent value to suggest other agencies where they might be a better fit.
Well, you mentioned other agencies. What types of skills or services would you be partnering with?
So I guess, we've mentioned SEO already, so we would partner with an agency who might focus specific on that. Other areas such as content writing, copywriting, as you call it, would be another area. Other areas we don't cover might be things like video or app development. And I think really it's easy sometimes to say yes to any work which comes your way when you're just starting out. But I think 13 years into the game, we're very clear on the projects that we love working on and the projects that we can add value to. And I think for those which fall outside of those, we've got some great partners who we work with who we can refer to as well.
It sounds like a strategy of run hard to the edges, but know you have edges as a business and partner with those who operate more deeply in their sector.
That's it.
Will, when we first chatted about this, you were talking about your ambitions for WebBox to both to be, but also to be known to be, leading web developer in the area. How, and perhaps also why? I founded WebBox in 2008, not because there was a lack of agencies, but actually because I felt there was a lack of service and value within this sector. And we always wanted WebBox to be one which is known for impeccable service, real expertise, and actually doing business with values. And that's what I want us to be known for. And I think actually now more than ever, we have that really clearly defined within our proposition. So yes, that comes down to our team being incredibly responsive. And actually that's tracked. So we know that our team get back to our clients within an hour, within working hours, all the way through to actually just doing business differently, actually having that kind of, ethics and morals through what we do to try and show our clients that actually we can just do things differently, but also get better results. And as companies scale, they can sometimes become more normative. The weirder, odd shapes of businesses and their founding zeal and so on changes. Is that for you as an entrepreneur? Is that a slight fear about size, or are you going to have success on your own terms regardless of scale?
We want to scale, and I know with scale comes other challenges, but we also know that there's a ceiling of what we want when it comes to scale. So I'm very clear that I don't want to build an agency with, 75, 100, 200 staff. That's not the ambition. That's not what we're setting out to do. But actually, we do have big ambitions to grow, and that does mean probably tripling the size that we're at the moment. But I think within that scale, we're able to keep a close hold on what sets us apart, why we're different, and our values. I think at that company size, we're able to do that without getting too big and starting maybe to lose some of that, some of that culture.
So that's specialist. Well, Will, you've got clear ambitions. You've demonstrated, great track record, particularly those two major pieces of work. And thank you ever so much for today's session. I hope many those watching will have found it remarkable and stimulating, the insights that you've brought as the boss of WebBox and more broadly about the digital world. So thank you very much indeed. Could I just say to Donna, by the way, who's asked a couple more questions, if you're okay with it, we'll put you in touch with Will and you can pick up directly. I don't want to offend with GDPR. If that's inappropriate, tell us on the chat. If it's not, we'll stick you in touch. But Will, thank you ever so much for this morning. That was really good. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And thanks to all of those who joined us for your time and for your many questions today at our business surgery. And of course, thank you for your support for Cardiff Life and for our events as they bound back. And we look forward to seeing so many people on September 30th for the Cardiff Life Awards. Good luck to you all in the coming months. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been a very special Cardiff Life Business Surgery. Thank you. Cardiff together, always. Thanks.